minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I just want to quickly follow up with a question my colleague, Mr. Foster, asked earlier to you, Mr. Tenev. You said that Rule 606 reports detail the arrangements you have with firms like Citadel. However, those only detail the payments you receive. Are you saying that you're prepared to publicly disclose the detailed terms of your payment for order flow with Citadel and other market makers?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. The 606 reports do publicly detail the payment for order flow arrangements we have with Citadel Securities and our other market makers.
Okay, well, I'll look forward to seeing those details then. Will you make sure that you get those over to our committee?
Certainly, we can have that arranged.
Okay, thank you. Last month, of course, as we saw this volatility with GameStop and AMC, and the stock started to rally, everybody seemed to get involved. And one survey recently said that 30% of Americans purchased one of those viral stocks. That includes people like my nephew and his two friends who stayed up until 4 in the morning to see if they could get a piece of this action. So one of the most concerning pieces, though, of this whole episode is how many people really felt like that's what they needed to do to get ahead. To me, this just exemplifies the income inequality across America, and it's one that we need to deal with. And I do appreciate the opportunity for retail investing. I want to make sure that it creates a good outcome, however, for the people who are using it. And right now, what I'm seeing is gambling on the stock market, and it's not a real solution to that income inequality. And I don't think we should pretend that it is. Just last June, when Hertz declared bankruptcy, after that, Robinhood was actively pushing the stock on its site. It was trending on Robinhood, and the promotion of that worthless stock, I don't think is good for investors. That's a gamble that they shouldn't have taken. That's just one example. But people having access to the stock market's nice, but if they don't have the money to invest, then really it's not democratization. And that's the real reason that 80% of the stock market's owned by 10% of the people. And of course, those are people who don't have to put all their money into healthcare or childcare or a car payment or whatever it is that's just keeping them going through their day-to-day. Earlier, Mr. Tenev, you said that you couldn't tell us what your client's rate of return is, but generally 99% of short-term traders underperform the market. So, Mr. Tenev, you say Robinhood's mission is to democratize finance. Is that correct?
That's correct, Congresswoman, yes.
Okay, so I want to ask you then, you've invested significantly in behavioral research, and just so you know, I own a digital design firm with my husband, so I'm familiar with what behavioral research can do for platforms and websites. And that behavioral research has really shaped how your app is designed. Is that correct?
Congresswoman, like many technology companies, we employ data scientists, user researchers, and designers to provide a better customer experience and understand our customers' needs.
So on the specifics, when people sign up, they get a scratch-off ticket to see what they get. Confetti falls every time they place an order. They get push notifications. They're encouraged to trade. If a friend signs up, they get a free stock, on and on. Why have you added specific gaming design elements to look like gambling to your app? That encourages more frequent trading.
Congresswoman, as I mentioned earlier, we want to give people what they want in a responsible, accessible way. We don't believe in gamification. We know investing is serious, and that's why most of our customers are buy and hold. A very small percentage of our customers utilize margin.
Well, I appreciate that, but folks like my nephew actually aren't your customers. They're your product. Your customer's sitting right next to you, Mr. Griffin, with Citadel. So when you don't pay as much for index fund or Apple or anything like that.
Yo, she just went off on him. She goes, my nephew, the person buying GameStop, is not your customer. Citadel. Citadel's a big investment firm that has a huge stake in Robinhood and got wrecked by the GameStop stuff. And she goes, nah, regular people aren't your customer, Robinhood. Fucking Citadel is. Sheesh!
conflicts of interest?
Well, first of all, I believe in our business model, Congresswoman. I believe our business model has become the industry standard for a reason. It's because it's good for customers. It's led to the democratization of the markets, and it works. And we're very proud to route to market makers on uniform terms without taking into account any of the payments that we generate from them in the routing, and based purely on the execution quality they provide to our customers.
Mr. Sile is recognized for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you for holding today's hearing. I'm concerned about investors in the state of Wisconsin and across our country to make sure that they have access to the market, access that is fair and equal to the big banks and the hedge funds in Wall Street. And we've seen great improvements in access, the democratization in finance, and I'm concerned that these hearings are going to lead us down the path of additional regulations before we fully investigated the facts. It was stated earlier that may not be the case, and I'd like to have inserted into the record a Bloomberg article dated January 28th titled "GameStop Trades Show Need for More Regulation," Democrat says.
Without objection, such is the order.
Thank you. I think it'll be helpful for everyone to review that, with the concerns being that we're going to drift away from the democratization of our finance system. Also, a bit disappointed that we don't have representation in our first hearing here today from the SEC or the DTCC, especially in the early days of the Biden administration. I think that that would be helpful, and hopefully we'll be able to have their participation in a future hearing. If I can direct my first question to Mr. Gabe Plotkin at Melvin Capital Management, there's obviously a lot of attention that came pouring in on a stock, GameStop, that you held a short position in. People were tweeting about it, things were building. Do you have any information as to uniquely why folks on Twitter and on Reddit and others uniquely targeted that stock?
Like I said, one person saw that Ryan Cohen. Let's see what this dumbass says first.
There were certainly some signs, as we kind of diligenced after the fact. I mean, there were even website names bought, like, nasty things about our firm as far back as November. So I'm not sure kind of how it started, but I think ultimately they saw an opportunity with a very high short interest stock that a lot of people could relate to, because it was a retail.
This is the dude from Melvin Capital. So this is the guy representing the hedge fund that got wrecked. And he was just asked, why did they target GameStop? Because one of the smartest e-commerce digital geniuses of our generation, this man's like young 30s, Ryan Cohen, who built Chewy, the pet company that outsells the whole entire pet niche and owns and beats Amazon. What companies can break into a niche that Amazon controls? That is rare. And he did it with his successful e-commerce brand, Chewy. Chewy, like when you order pet food for your dog, they address the mail to your dog, right? Like if your dog's name is Skippy, they'll send the mail to Dear Skippy. And these fucking pet owners love it. And it's just little things like that that made Chewy so successful. And all these pet owners go through Chewy. And it's because Ryan Cohen is this brilliant e-commerce dude. And he bought $70 million, 13% of GameStop's company at the top of the GameStop price. That was like $1.3 billion. So he like really did well. But he still owns his share of GameStop because he is about to turn GameStop around. They're closing 1,000 stores in 2021. The new head of the board is Ryan Cohen, the guy I've been gushing over this whole time. And then you have shills like Melvin Capital coming out here saying, yeah, it was memes. It was just Wall Street Bets and meme group collective. It was just Redditors and memes. No, it was Ryan Cohen. Ryan Cohen should be everywhere when they're talking about GameStop. But I don't think Ryan Cohen really wants his name out there. And I think it's more by design. And I do believe at the end of next year, GameStop is going to be way higher than it is now. I think GameStop really is going to have a kick-ass year with digital sales and stuff.
Limitations on their buy orders?
Yes, I do, Congressman. I think that's an important question. Many brokerages put in place similar limitations on buy orders for many of these securities.
For the record, I've heard conflicting reports on that. I think it's something that this committee needs to further look into. is to the differential between what occurred under your control at Robinhood and some of the other brokerages. I think it's a question that we should fully investigate on this committee, make sure we have all the facts as we're moving forward. Could you detail, Mr. Tenev, your plans going forward as it relates to making sure that an event like this doesn't occur and that you have the foresight to prevent these late collateral needs?
Absolutely, Congressman. Thank you for that important question. Certainly, the additional $3.4 billion helps provide significant.
Thank you for that important question. What a boner. Thank you for your question. He doesn't want to be here. What? And this guy's parents both worked for the World Bank. The CEO of Robinhood, Vlad, this dude comes from the same bankers that he is bailing out here and screwing over the little man. His parents worked for the World Bank, both of them. Vlad's parents, yeah, this dude's privileged as fuck.
What you were saying, I think it was a mistake. With that, the gentleman's time has expired, and we'll move on to Mr. Caston. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much to our witnesses. There's a whole bunch of themes in today's hearing, and I want to, if I can, just tie a couple threads together that I think are relevant that we've had corners of. June 2020, Alex Kearns, who was 20 years old at the time, from Naperville, Illinois, killed himself, largely thanks to a bug in the Robinhood system. The bug was that he turned on the app, said he owed $730,000 that he did not have because of options positions that he thought canceled out. The helpline, of course. He sent several panicked emails, 3 to be precise, did not receive a response. Ultimately, there was a response from emails saying that, in fact, his positions were covered, but by that point, it was too late because he had taken his own life. This is a gentleman who was 20 years old. Under Illinois law, he was not allowed to buy a beer, but he was allowed to take on $730,000 in positions and exposure that he did not have the liquidity to cover. Now, your mission, Mr. Tenev, is to democratize finance, but the history of financial regulation is to protect people like Alex Kearns from the system. As the old joke goes, if you're playing poker and you can't figure out who the fish is at the table, you should leave the table because you're probably the fish. And there is an innate tension in your business model between democratizing finance, which is a noble calling, and being a conduit to feed fish to sharks. I want to cover a little bit of timeline. December 2019, Robinhood was assessed a $1.25 million fine by FINRA for failing to disclose payment for order flow agreements to your customers. 6 months after that, Alex Kearns committed suicide. 6 months after that, December 20, Robinhood paid a $65 million fine to the SEC for, among other things, failing to disclose payment for order flow agreements to your customers. There is a tension in your model. Now, along with that, according to your 606s, as been reported by CNBC, you attract a higher rate for equity trades from payment for order flow from many of your competitors, 17 cents per 100 trades versus about 11 cents for your competitors, even more, over 50 cents per 100 trades for options. I'd ask unanimous consent to enter the CNBC article into the record.
Congressman, we have 7 market makers. I can get back to you with the precise number for options under 7.
According to your 606 disclosures, you only list 4: Citadel, Susquehanna, Wolverine, and Morgan Stanley. Are there any others besides the ones listed in your 606 disclosures?
If that's in the 606, Congressman, I'm sure it's accurate.
Okay, so do you route options trades to anyone who you do not have a payment for order flow agreement with?
Currently, we have, Congressman, uniform payment for order flow arrangements with all of our market makers. So they would all be under the same arrangements.
Okay, so how do you ensure that you're getting best pricing if every single firm, you're ruling out anybody who is not paying you for the privilege to trade?
Congressman, we believe having uniform payment for order flow arrangements with all market makers ensures structurally that there is no conflict of interest, because it prevents payment for order flow from being an input in decision making for where to route orders.
Okay, I'm almost out of time, but there is an innate conflict in your model. Let's imagine right now that we are today's version of Alex Kearns. I'm nervous. I think I've got an exposure. and I call your helpline now. Let's call and let's listen in the time we have remaining to what I'm going to hear on the other end of the phone.
Thanks for calling Robinhood. Please visit us at robinhood.com or on our app for support. If you have an urgent trading need, please make sure to include details of your order when reaching out. Thanks and have a great day.
Mr. Caston, you may wrap up.
I yield back my time.
You may wrap up. Go ahead, Mr. Caston.
I have no further questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I will now call on Mr. Gooden for 5 minutes.
10 minutes. 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Is Mr. Gooden on the line?
Madam Chair, Mr. Gooden's in Texas and he's unavailable to.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Then let us hear from, I believe it would be at this time, Mr. Timmons. For 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. It seems we're here today to try to find culpability in the events that transpired last month. I seem to spend a lot of my time thinking about capital requirements and the time it takes to execute these trades. So I'm going to focus my questions there. Mr. Tenev, you have repeatedly invoked capital requirements that both your company and your clearinghouse are required to abide by in order to explain the restriction of trading last month. My friend and colleague, Mr. Barr, asked you about this earlier, but I would like to hone in on this a little bit. Could you explain what specifically about the nature or volume of the trades being ordered by your customers caused these increased capital requirements to be triggered? And how did the level of collateral required compare to what you would normally have to abide by?
Thank you for that question, Congressman. So to give you a sense for the increase, our capital requirements, our deposit requirements with NSCC from January 25th to January 28th, so a span of 3 days, increased tenfold.
What is the most your capital requirements had been prior to this event?
I believe there was a table, Congressman, that I provided in my written testimony that had the precise value at risk and special charges in the prior days. Happy to refer
but obviously
to that.
It never been close to this amount, and now you have additional capital that you've raised, and so this should not happen again. Again, I think you referenced 1 in 3.5 million was the likelihood of this situation occurring. Is that correct?
That's correct, and that's not a Robinhood number. That's actually a third-party industry number.
Are you aware of the origin of these capital requirements?
I do believe that these capital requirements and specifically the NSCC deposit was spelled out in Dodd-Frank.
So the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act is arguably to blame for what happened. You would not have halted trading in this case, but for this exorbitant capital requirement that you were unable to meet. So I think that when we're searching for culpability, we need to realize that the well-intentioned legislation from over 10 years ago is somewhat culpable in this entire conversation. Ms. Schultz, will you elaborate on that? Do you agree that Dodd-Frank is somewhat responsible for the situation that Robinhood found themselves in?
I think the capital requirements in Dodd-Frank can be seen as responsible. I think it's incumbent on us to evaluate those capital requirements and whether they are appropriate given the business models at issue. I think that's also a question of settlement times and modernizing our system. But I agree that the capital requirements here put into place are one of the reasons that we're having these conversations today.
And you went to the next place I wanted to go, which is the time it takes to settle these transactions. So, 12 years ago, 10, 11 years ago, we never really considered the whole concept of a Robinhood, of an app-based trade platform that democratizes access to purchasing and selling publicly traded companies. So I do think that that needs to be revisited, especially because it is unfair. There are other companies that have far more resources that are not in the situation, and those companies have larger investors. So we really are picking on the little guy in this entire conversation. So between um, reconsidering capital requirements for um, retail investor platforms, number one, and number two, trying to find a way to settle these transactions faster, those two things seem to be the best way to achieve our objective of making sure this doesn't happen again. I do hope that we can hear from Michael Bodson from the DTCC in the next hearing, or perhaps someone from the NSC. I'm hearing something strange on my computer. I'm sorry, one second. Thank you. I'll end with this. One of my colleagues across the aisle said the deck is stacked against the little guy, and I couldn't agree more. But in this case, the very committee that is conducting this hearing has more culpability, I would say, than any of the witnesses that we have brought before us today. So we need to make sure this doesn't happen again. I look forward to working with my colleagues across the aisle. With that, I yield back.
This
Thank you.
time has expired. At the request of one of our witnesses, we will take a short recess. The committee stands in recess for 5 minutes.
Mimi, so much for your team.
Muted. Sorry, I was muted. Kind of cool how Theta has the NASA thing going on. The amount of edge nodes keeps going up, man. Theta edge node. I gotta edit episode 1 of this first, dude. I think I'm gonna try and get diamonds. Content.
and a $65 million civil penalty from the SEC. My first question for the CEO of Robinhood: how much of your revenue comes from payment for order flow?
Thank you, Congressman. Let me first state regulatory compliance is at the center of everything that we do.
I want to reclaim my time.
Things
How,
right.
how much of your revenue comes from payment for order flow? The answer to the question is asked, given the time constraints.
Congressman, I don't recall the exact percentage. It's over 50%.
And how much do you know? How much of your order flow revenue comes specifically from Citadel?
Citadel is indeed a important counterparty. It's our largest counterparty in terms of where we route orders to. And I want to explain that a little bit, Congressman.
Well, I want to move on because I want to cover the concerns about gamification. The stated mission of Robinhood is the democratization of finance, but I worry that the real world impact of Robinhood is the democratization of financial addiction. You know, Robinhood has gaming features that seem to manipulate retail traders into making rash and reckless and potentially ruinous investments. We all know the tragic story of Alexander Kearns. According to a memo from the Financial Services Committee, there's one feature in particular that encourages retail investors to tap on the Robinhood app up to 1,000 times a day in order to improve their position on the wait list for Robinhood highly coveted cash management feature. Do you share my concern that a retail trader tapping on a Robinhood app 1,000 times a day is a sign of addiction?
Congressman, that particular feature that you're discussing was to get access to our debit card plus high yield savings product, which is one of the many features targeting passive investors that we've rolled out over the past.
Mr. Tanev, 1,000 times a day? You are encouraging your customers to tap on an app 1,000 times a day? That to me is a sign of addiction, and it worries me that you fail to see it in the same light.
Congressman, we didn't encourage anyone to tap on anything. To get access to the debit card, people were placed on a wait list, and we wanted to give our customers delightful features so that they know that we're listening to them and that we care about them. And this is just one example of how we add great features that customers love to our products.
Look, addictive trading might be bad for your customers, but it's good for Robinhood. Addictive trading means more trading, and more trading means more money for Robinhood. There's a sense in which Robinhood monetizes addiction. You make money from the quantity rather than the quality of trading. I want to, much has been said about price improvement. One of the arguments for payment for order flow is price improvement. According to the Wall Street Journal, Citadel Securities claims to have saved investors a total of $1.3 billion last year. But I'm wondering, how can Citadel possibly know how much it saves retail investors? Citadel does not transact directly with retail investors. It transacts directly with brokers. And even if you stipulate that there has been a cost savings, it's unclear to me how much of that cost savings is being passed on to the retail investors and how much of that cost savings is actually being pocketed by Robinhood as profit. Right? We know that there's no commission, there's no visible fee at the front end of the transaction, but what is the hidden cost to investors at the back end of the transaction? Can you give me clarity about the hidden cost to investors? Mr.
Congressman, I appreciate the question. I think that's a very important question. In 2020, Robinhood provided our customers in excess of $1 billion in price improvement. So that price improvement is measured relative to the NBBO, the National Best Bid and Best Offer, which is the reference price per security on all major lit exchanges.
I ran out of time, so I will yield back. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair,
Okay, we were having a technical problem here, but I think it has been corrected. Mr. Taylor, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Uh, will will point out that today and this week has been very hard for my home state of Texas and for my district in Collin County. We have faced a record-breaking freeze across the state, which has crushed our power generation capability, and we have had some really heartbreaking stories of need. In fact, during this hearing, I was called away to help a mayor try to get power back to their water pumping stations to make sure that they had water for their citizens in Texas today. So for those members of the committee, I encourage you to send your thoughts and prayers to the people of Texas as they go through this really challenging time. On to the topic of this hearing, Mr. Tennant, I just wanted to go in. I know there's been a lot of questions about the margin call that you got on the morning of the 28th of January. But I'm not sure that we really understand how the margin call changed from 3 billion to 1.5 billion to 600 million. Can you sort of go through how did you negotiate the margin call down? And I mean, and these are very sizable decreases, right? You're 50% then 50% again to something that you could then in turn manage. How did you decrease the margin call?